What's up, YouTube? So today we're going to be taking a look at the fantasy book series, the Licanius trilogy, written by James Islington, starting with the first book, The Shadow of What Was Lost. So before we get into what I'm talking about, why is a programming channel making a fiction book review? Well, for one, it's my channel and I get to do what I want. For another, I really like reading, and I think reading fiction is a critical part of personal development. A good book of fiction in whatever genre should force you to think about complex situations and evaluate not only how the characters in the story react to them, but also how you would react to them. And good fiction just does so much more than just tell stories. It makes you think, it makes you feel, it makes you desire, it makes you accept and reject and question other ways to see the world. And there's just so much that you can get from fiction that you can't really get from anything besides real world experience. And, in the case of like fantasy and like thrillers and like science fiction, like you can't really get that real world experience, like you're never going to go, like reforge the sword of Narsil or the shards of Narsil and go take on Sauron, right? Like that's not going to happen. So like you have to read about it. Plus dragons and magic and space are dope as hell, so why not? So with that out of the way, what this review is going to be is mostly just talking about kind of what I enjoyed about it without really talking about what is in it, because I think that's something that you should be like, the story is like the story is like the flesh, and the skeleton is what I want to kind of like talk about here. So with that said, the Licanius trilogy is a high fantasy series written by the Australian James Islington with magic and demons and all that fun stuff. Even includes some time travel, and it's all done pretty well. It's crazy that this is his debut, or his writing debut. So the three books, just a very high level of the plot. The three books span a couple of years in which the four main characters face a lot of problems, fight a lot of bad guys, get imprisoned, lose their powers, other challenges. And of course, as the protagonists, like they find ways to overcome the challenges, they regain or learn new powers, they make difficult choices for the greater good, and ultimately the series ends with the big bad defeated at great cost, because that's how most good series end. And so, why would I talk about this series? Well, for one, I just read it and it was really good. And, also like it's really cool fiction because it has some, it asks some really good questions of the reader. So one of them, kind of the main theme probably of the series is like, the greater good and like what that actually means for us as people, right? So, how far can one justify taking a path of doing horrific things in service of a greater good? And what does one do if they learn that the greater good they've been following isn't really what it seems? For example, like in our industry, in software, what if you are one of the original OpenAI researchers who was like, how can we like make sure that the singularity doesn't end all humanity? And then now you work at, a chatbot company. Like what do you do in that case? Like, that's a question that they have to think about, and it's also a question that you have to think about as you read the book, or as you read the series. And then, is it possible for someone to commit these heinous acts, misguided or not, and still be a good person? Can they redeem themselves? Is it possible to become irredeemable? These are some of the questions that the series asks, but importantly, it doesn't really answer them, which I think is a good thing, because like fiction should make you think. With that, for my impressions, there was kind of a lot that I liked about the series as an avid fantasy reader. And so, number one, like this part is 100% opinion, but I think the author has a great sense of narrative flow. There's a lot that happens in the series, and there's a lot of downtime in the series, but it never felt like it was rushing or that it was dragging or anything like that. Like I have a few complaints about the series as a whole, but flow is definitely not one of them. Like he's very, very good at kind of managing like, the peaks and troughs kind of thing that you expect in a good crafted narrative. So then another thing that's really cool is that the magic systems are interesting. There's two kinds. One is the typical like, fireballs and energy blast and whatever. And then the other one is like more of a meta magic that's like incredibly rare. It allows for manipulation of that base type of magic, and then also like other things. Characters can use it to like slow down time, There's an ability to like see limited visions of the future. And seeing how the characters like use it and also like react to these powers is like, it's really cool. And so more on the like the limited visions of the future thing. It's that's not unique in and of itself. Like like oracles have been a thing since Greek antiquity. But itself, it raises one of those like great questions. Like, if I know that something will happen eventually, but not when, what should I do if I want to prevent it from happening? What if I see my own death? And the answer is, if it's guaranteed to happen, you can't. But then also you have to grapple with the dilemma of like what control you do have, if any. Is there a best time to make this happen? Is there a best circumstances under which I can make this happen? There's a lot of stuff that you still have to think about, right? It comes up a lot in the series, and I'll just say it's one more reason that I recommend these books. So the world also, like, the world we're shown is mostly limited to like one country, but do you get to see it from different time periods, and as the series progresses, it undergoes a whole lot of change. Like, even in the first book, it's already like a drastic change occurs like during the like to the country itself. And we also do get some other locations as well, so it feels really dynamic, and it again helps the narrative flow along really well. And then of course the thing that related to the blurb that I gave at the beginning, the questions that the series gives to the reader and the way that they're woven into the narrative so well are what really put me onto making this review. Some of these questions are about like determinism and free will, the balance of moral acts, and if someone can ever become unredeemable, even given eternity to do so. And then there's also some like balance of power politicking and philosophizing to deal with. Like, not everyone has the magic abilities. Not everyone has the the ability to like do the magic stuff, and that causes some tension in the politics and like the philosophies of like like should these people be allowed to just do things freely? Like, probably not, but also like what kind of restrictions should we do? There's a lot of stuff in that sense that it kind of forces you to grapple with. That said, I do have a couple of things that were like kind of minor detractions from the experience. And so I will say, like, the series gets much better with each book. But the first one did also leave me kind of feeling like, okay, that was fine, I think. Like, I wasn't sure if the stuff that annoyed me was enough to make me put the series down completely, even though I like mostly enjoyed the book, if that makes sense. It's really weird. Like, I was it's a weird sense of ambivalence. Like, I enjoyed it, but I was also kind of like, do I want to continue reading? And then I read some reviews of like the series, and generally people agreed that like it gets better as it goes on. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. At worst, I've found a series that I don't really want. I don't really anjoy. So like, whatever. Another annoyance was kind of the distinct line another annoyance was kind of the distinct line between the protagonists and the older characters, where the older characters were frequently dropping cryptic hints about the plot, while also kind of dropping that meme, like, I don't have time to explain why I don't have time to explain. And the protagonists, who are mostly like young adult characters, just kind of have to be like, okay, so I'm just supposed to do whatever thing and not understand why, and it'll work out. It gets a lot better in the second book. Like, there's a lot, like, there's less of that, like, cryptic, like, the older people have some conspiracy or whatever. And also, it might just be a consequence of it was his debut novel, and also, setting up a fairly intricate trilogy, but it did have me, kind of like steaming a little bit. And then another one is the character names, man. There's only like 40 proper nouns in the whole series, and it still made me feel like I kind of needed a Silmarillion style, like, name character guide with how similar some of the names are. And it's like a kind of minor thing. Like, it takes you out of it for like 2 or 3 sentences at most. When each time it happens, but it doesn't kind of happen a lot, and it is a bit annoying to read some offhand reference to a character and be like, are they the person that does this stuff, or is it the other person that does that stuff? But again, it's a very minor thing, but like it did detract from my enjoyment a little bit. So to sum it all up, this series is really good. The first book has some minor issues. Most of the issues are like very much like concentrated in the first in the first book, which we can again probably attribute that to it being his debut novel and all that. But the second and third books do a fantastic job of putting together this crazy, positive, crazy narrative, driven by philosophy, character development. There's a little bit of kissing too, and it all ends up neatly tidied up with one of the best series endings that you could hope for. I was really impressed, and I'm making this whole review where I'm basically like, this book is awesome, or this series is awesome. So yeah, in the description, I will have an affiliate link to the first book. I think if if all of this stuff sounds good to you, and you like magic and fantasy, this is definitely a series to like give it a try. I would say try the first one. If you really like it, then just read the whole series. If you don't like it, that's fine. Like first book is fine. If you're like ambivalent, then I would say like go to the second book and see how you feel about that one. But that's kind of my ultimate recommendation. So with that, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I would like to do more of these like fantasy book reviews. I really want to do a similar kind of video about the Malazan series, which is hands down like my favorite piece of media ever at this point. And so yeah, please, I hope you enjoyed, and please have yourself a great day, week, month, and year, and everything else. So thanks for watching, and have a good one.